Monica raised her champagne flute at my son Tyler's engagement party. 60 guests on the terrace. The cascades behind her. She looked right at me. He lives off scraps. I carried him through 20 years. Stone walls carried every word to every table. My ex-wife's voice didn't waver. I set my napkin down, folded it once, precise at the crease, smiled, stood. "Congratulations, Tyler," I said. Then I walked to my truck. 3 weeks later, she'd need my signature on a deal worth millions. If you want more stories like this, please subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. I appreciate you. My name is Alden Krevalin. I'm 58 years old, and I live in a 2-bedroom cedar cabin on 3 acres along the Deschutes River outside Bend, Oregon. No mortgage, no debt. The place isn't much to look at from the road. Cedar siding gone silver from weather. A covered porch with 2 chairs I built myself, and a 40-foot aluminum antenna tower out back that my ex-wife once called an ugly metal stick. She wasn't wrong about the aesthetics. But on a clear night, I can reach a station in Yokohama. 5,000 miles of Pacific, crossed by a signal from a cabin nobody looks at twice. Monica never understood anything she couldn't show to dinner guests. I spent 20 years at the Oregon Department of Transportation, Bridge Division. The salary was government grade. Monica kept a spreadsheet. Every paycheck landed short of whatever number she had in her head that month. What she didn't track were my evenings. After dinner, after the dishes, I'd walk out to the detached workshop behind our house and sit at my drafting table under fluorescent lights until midnight. Seismic isolator bearings. Retrofit anchor bolt patterns. Load distribution geometry for bridge piers that needed to survive what the ground could throw at them. "You're out there playing with your little drawings again," she said once, standing in the workshop doorway in her bathrobe, "while I'm in here figuring out how to pay for Tyler's braces." I didn't look up from the drafting table. The drawings paid for the braces. She just didn't know it yet. The math never worked. Old bridges would crumble in a quake, but no state had the budget to tear them down and start over. Not even close. What if you could retrofit them in place? What if you could design bearing configurations that let the deck move horizontally during a quake while keeping the vertical load stable? I filed my first patent in 2001, the second in 2003, the third in 2004. On March 15, 2005, a 5 magnitude earthquake hit southern Oregon. 3 bridges I'd retrofitted on Interstate 5 near Roseburg held. No structural damage. No closures. Traffic rolled across them the next morning at 65 miles per hour. No detours. No lane closures. No one noticed. 2 neighboring spans that hadn't been retrofitted cracked at the piers and required emergency shoring. The state report named the retrofit methodology. My methodology. Within 18 months, transportation departments in California, Washington, Alaska, Nevada, and 7 other earthquake-prone states adopted the same approach. My patents became the standard. My patent attorney, Randall Ostrowski, out of a firm in Portland, started fielding licensing calls. First a trickle, then steady. Non-exclusive agreements, each one charging royalties based on a percentage of the seismic retrofit component of whatever bridge project used my designs. At the time of the divorce in 2004, the royalty income was about $30,000 a year. Monica's divorce attorney looked at that number, looked at my government salary, and treated the patents like garage sale clutter. Monica got the house. I kept the patents. The royalties didn't stay at $30,000. 3 framed patent certificates hang on my workshop wall now. Below them, a filing cabinet holds the licensing agreements. 47 of them across 12 states. The annual total crossed $200,000 3 years ago. Ostrowski manages everything through a licensing entity in Portland. The money arrives without fanfare, without celebration, without anyone at Thanksgiving knowing it exists. My sister Peggy drove up from Medford on a Saturday in October, the fall before the engagement party. She'd retired from teaching the year before and had too much free time to worry about other people's problems. She sat in the workshop with a cup of coffee and watched me review a new licensing request from a firm in Anchorage. "You have to tell Tyler," she said. "No, she's out there telling everyone you live on scraps, Alden." At his own graduation, she told his friends you couldn't afford to buy him a suit. "I bought him the suit." "I know you bought him the suit. That's my point." She set her mug down hard enough to rattle the drafting compass. 10 years of this. 10 years of her standing up at dinners and holidays and telling people she carried you. And you just sit here with $200,000 a year in that filing cabinet and say nothing. I turned from the licensing document. Peggy's face was red, hands flat on the table. "If I tell Tyler the truth, he has to choose," I said. "His mother or his father. His version of the family or mine. That's not a load a kid should carry. He's 30 years old. Doesn't matter." Peggy stared at me for a long time. Then she picked up her coffee and looked out the window at the antenna tower and the river beyond it. "You're the most stubborn man I've ever known," she said. I went back to the licensing agreement. Outside, the Deschutes moved north without stopping for anyone. The pattern started at Tyler's college graduation in 2016. Oregon State, outdoor ceremony, families packed along the quad in folding chairs. Tyler stood with his friends in cap and gown, introducing Monica and Grant to his roommates. I stood 3 rows back, hands in my pockets. Monica's voice carried the way it always does. Bright, calibrated for distance. "His father has a little government job," she said, touching one of Tyler's friends on the arm. "Building roads or something." I honestly lost track. She laughed. The too loud version, the one that tells the room she's being charming rather than cruel. Grant stood beside her, hands clasped, wearing the smile of a man who looks better by comparison and knows it. Tyler's jaw tightened. A small thing. Most people wouldn't catch it. I caught it every time. I shook his hand afterward, told him I was proud of him, drove home. Didn't mention it, neither did he. That was the first one, not the last. Thanksgiving 2018. Monica and Grant hosted at their Lake Oswego house. New wallpaper in the dining room. She'd redecorated again. 12 people around the table. Wine poured, candles lit. Between the turkey and the pie, Monica launched into her standard performance. 20 years I carried that man, she told the table, addressing everyone and no one. 20 years of making sure the bills got paid on a government salary while he sat in the garage with his little projects. Nobody challenged her. Grant cut his turkey. Tyler's uncle refilled his wine. Peggy's hands disappeared below the table. I could see her knuckles from across the room. I ate my pie, complimented the crust, left by 8. Peggy called that night from Medford. I almost said something, she told me, voice tight. I had the words right there. Good thing you didn't. When does this end, Alden? When she stops needing it. My sister went quiet. We both knew the answer. Never. Holiday party 2020. Sane Lake Oswego house, different wallpaper. Monica stood by the fireplace with a glass of red wine, introducing Grant to a couple I'd never met. "This is Grant," she said, sliding her free hand through his arm. The upgrade, the too loud laugh again, the one calibrated for an audience. The couple smiled. Grant smiled. The word hung in the room, like perfume nobody wanted to acknowledge. I stood near the kitchen counter with a glass of water and watched the performance from 20 feet away. Monica had told this story so many times that she believed it now. Maybe always had. Tyler built his own system for handling it. At family dinners, when Monica started in on me, his jaw would lock and his eyes would go to his plate. He'd wait for a pause, then redirect. "Mom, have you tried the wine?" Or, "Grant, how's the new project?" A grown man trained to change the subject whenever his mother attacked his father. He never contradicted her. Not once. I didn't blame him for that. I'd taught him the silence by example. By 2024, the story had calcified into fact. Monica's social circle had absorbed it through years of repetition. I was the dead weight. She was the survivor. Grant was the reward. Anyone who pushed back got tears and accusations of betrayal. Peggy learned that lesson at a lunch in 2022 when she said, "That's not exactly how it happened." And Monica's chin dropped, her eyes filled on cue, and 3 women at the table turned on Peggy before the salad arrived. Peggy spent 6 months in social exile before the family smoothed it over. Then Sophie. Tyler brought her to a family dinner in the spring of 2024. Sophie Huang, 27, sharp-featured, direct, no social filter installed yet. A litigation paralegal. She shook my hand and held it a beat longer than necessary, eyes moving from my face to my wrist. The Seiko, then to my boots, then back to my face. Not sympathy. Inventory. That night, driving back to Portland, she said something to Tyler. "Your father doesn't add up." "What do you mean?" "The watch alone is worth more than your mother's story allows." Tyler didn't answer. Sophie told me this later. She said he gripped the steering wheel and stared at the road and didn't say a word for 11 miles. The first crack in 8 years of practiced silence. I'd been to the club once before, years ago, for a fundraiser Peggy dragged me to. The Terrace hadn't changed. Stone floor, low walls, the cascades filling the horizon like a postcard. Nobody asked for. But they dressed it up for Tyler's party. String lights in loops overhead. White linen on every table. A champagne bar tucked into the corner where the stone wall met the railing. 60 guests. Tyler and Sophie at the head table, positioned at the open end of a horseshoe arrangement that turned every other seat into an audience. I took mine at a side table near the back with Peggy and 2 of Tyler's college friends I'd met once. Good spot. Clear sightline to my son without being in anyone's way. Peggy smoothed the tablecloth with both palms. "When she starts," she said, not looking at me. I shook my head once. Peggy was right. I knew she was right. But I wanted one evening where the calculations in my head were wrong. The sun dropped low enough to throw long shadows across the stone. Guests filled their glasses. Laughter carried in the mountain air. Tyler caught my eye from the head table and raised his champagne. I raised my water. He smiled. Sophie leaned into his shoulder, eyes moving table to table the way they'd moved across my wrist at that first dinner. Monica sat 3 tables to my left in a cashmere wrap over something dark and fitted. Gold at her wrists and throat. Grant beside her, square-shouldered in a sport coat, hands folded on the linen. They looked like a magazine spread. That was always the point. Monica's older sister Denise stood first. Tall like Monica but without the angles. She tapped her glass with a butter knife, waited for the terrace to quiet, then raised her champagne toward Tyler and Sophie. "To my nephew and his beautiful fiancée," she said. "Watching you two together reminds me that some people just fit. Your mother and I are so proud of the man you've become, and Sophie, welcome to the family." Warm, simple, done, Denise started to sit. Monica's hand caught her sister's elbow. "Let me add something," she said, already standing, already reaching for her own glass. Denise sat down, half relieved to disappear. She always was. Monica held the champagne flute at shoulder height. Her green eyes swept the horseshoe. 60 faces turned. "My son," she began, "didn't get where he is by accident. I made sure of that." She paused, smiled. "The one that showed teeth but didn't reach her eyes. He lives off scraps. I carried him through 20 years. She looked right at me. 20 years I spent making sure that man had clean shirts and dinner on the table while he played with his little drawings in the garage." She gestured toward my table with the glass. 60 heads followed the gesture. And when I finally had the courage to walk away from that shack by the river and that ugly junk tower in the yard, people acted like I was wrong. Like I should have stayed and collected his government pension and pretended it was enough. The stone walls caught her voice and bounced it to every corner of the terrace. No microphone needed. Tyler got his drive from me, his ambition, his work ethic. She looked at Grant, and he got to see what a real partnership looks like. I watched her fingers tighten on the glass stem. Her chin lifted. Her voice found another register. "So here's to Tyler and Sophie," she said, "and to mothers who do the carrying." She drank. The terrace was silent for 3 seconds, then scattered applause. A few glasses raised. Most stayed on the table. I looked at Tyler. His jaw was locked, both hands flat on the table. Sophie sat beside him, but she wasn't watching Monica. She was watching me. Those dark eyes moved across my face the way they'd moved across my wrist at that first dinner. Calculation. Grant studied his champagne. The smile never left his face. It never reached his eyes either. Peggy's knuckles were white under the table. I put my hand on her forearm, held it there until her fingers unclenched. Then I stood, folded my napkin once at the crease, and set it on the table. Walked to the head table where my son sat rigid in his navy blazer. Put my hand on his shoulder. "Congratulations, Tyler," I said. His eyes were wet. He opened his mouth, closed it. I squeezed his shoulder once, turned, and walked across the stone terrace toward the parking lot. The Cascades had gone pink at the peaks. 60 guests watched. I didn't look back. My truck was parked under a ponderosa pine at the far edge of the lot. I got in, started the engine, and sat there for a full minute with my hands on the wheel. Tyler's engagement party. 27 years of making sure he never had to choose. and she'd made him choose anyway. I pulled out. Tyler told me afterward what happened next. Sophie turned to him at the table, the folded napkin still sitting where I'd left it. "That wasn't normal," she said. Tyler stared at the napkin. He couldn't meet her eyes. 3 weeks after the engagement party, I was in the workshop sharpening a pencil with a pocket knife when Ostrowski called. Late afternoon, sun through the west window, catching the edge of the drafting table. The Deschutes ran high outside, loud enough to hear through the open door. "Alden," he said, "you're going to want to hear this." Ostrowski didn't say things like that. 15 years managing my licensing portfolio, and the man communicated in contract language and billing codes. Something in his voice had shifted. Not excitement. Satisfaction. A long equation finally balancing. "I got a call this morning from a project manager at a construction firm in Lake Oswego," he said. "Avery Construction. They're preparing a bid for the Highway 97 bridge replacement. $40 million Oregon DOT contract. Page 47 of the RFP lists your patent numbers. All 3. I set the pencil down. The contract requires direct licensing agreements for any proprietary seismic technology specified in the engineering plans. They've been using your designs for years through a sublicense. But that won't cut it for a government contract this size. They need your signature. How long have they been sublicensing?" I asked, though I already knew the answer was in my filing cabinet. 11 years, Ostrowski said. Every quarter. I pulled the records after the call. Avery Construction, LLC, has been paying your royalties since 2013. Through the third-party chain, so they never knew who held the patents. Just paid the fee and used the technology. I looked at the filing cabinet. Third drawer, alphabetical. Avery Construction would be near the front. The project manager's name is Barker, Ostrowski continued. I directed him to our office for the direct license. He's sending Grant Avery himself to negotiate. 3-week deadline before the bid closes. If they don't secure the license, they lose the contract. And a project this size, walking away damages their bonding capacity for future government work. Grant Avery, I said. Your ex-wife's husband. Piao? Yes. A pause. I recognized the name from the divorce file. I leaned back in my chair. The patent certificates hung on the wall behind me. 3 gold seals. 3 embossed eagles. My name on each one, same name Monica, spent a decade erasing from the family record. Grant Avery had been writing checks to my licensing entity for 11 years. Quarterly payments drawn from the same firm income that funded Monica's cashmere wraps and Lake Oswego wallpaper. He'd been paying me without knowing it. She'd been living off the man she called a failure without knowing it. What are his options if I don't sign? I asked. He withdraws the bid, loses the contract, explains to his bonding company why he couldn't secure required proprietary licenses for a $40 million project. It raises questions about his firm's capability, questions that follow him to the next bid and the one after that. Standard licensing terms, I said. Same as everyone else. I figured you'd say that, Ostrowski said. I'll prepare the agreement. I hung up and sat at the drafting table for a long time. The river outside, the antenna tower, the certificates on the wall, the smell of cedar shavings from the pencil I'd been sharpening when the phone rang. No triumph, no revenge. The particular calm of a load test coming back within tolerance. The numbers held. They always held. Sophie found the patents the same week. Tyler told me this later, after the dust settled. She'd gone looking. The engagement party had cracked something open in her, that paralegal instinct for following a trail until it led somewhere. She logged into the legal databases she used for litigation research and searched Alden Krevalin. 3 United States patent filings, each one cited in Oregon Department of Transportation Engineering Standards. Cross-referenced in California, Washington, Alaska, Nevada. 7 more states. Academic papers in structural engineering journals. Conference proceedings. She printed everything. 40 pages of licensing records, patent abstracts, citation indexes. Spread them across the kitchen table in their Portland apartment and waited for Tyler to come home. He told me he stood in the kitchen doorway with his bag still on his shoulder, reading the first page. Then the second, then the third. Tyler is a civil engineer. He could read the patent abstracts the way I could. Load paths, bearing configurations, stress distributions jumping off the page. He could see the isolator bearing designs, the retrofit methodology that let states reinforce aging bridges without demolition. He understood what it meant that 12 states had adopted the standard. He understood the royalty structure. He read for 40 minutes. Sophie sat across from him and said nothing. When he finished, he set the last page down and put both hands flat on the table. His little drawings, Tyler said. Sophie reached across and covered his hand with hers. Tyler stared at the patent filings. His father's full name printed on documents that had kept bridges standing and traffic moving for 20 years. The same name his mother had spent a decade turning into a punchline at dinner parties. He didn't call me that night. He wasn't ready, but the silence between us had changed. It wasn't distance anymore. It was a man standing at the approach of a bridge he'd never tested. Ostrowski called me the evening after the meeting. I was on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the Deschutes turn copper in the last light. He told me everything, not in summary, in sequence, the way a man recounts something he's been waiting years to witness. Grant arrived first. Navy suit, polished shoes, a leather portfolio under his arm. Ostrowski met him in the foyer of the converted Victorian in Portland's Pearl District and shook his hand. Grant's grip was firm, his voice measured. He'd brought his project manager's notes, the RFP with page 47 flagged, and a copy of his firm's bonding documentation. Prepared. Then Monica walked in behind him. Ostrowski told me he recognized her from the divorce proceedings, though they'd never spoken. Cashmere wrap over a fitted dress. Gold at her wrists and throat. She extended her hand like she was greeting a dinner guest, not entering a patent law office. "I'm here to make sure this goes smoothly," she said. Ostrowski led them to the conference room. Heavy oak table. Tall Victorian windows letting in afternoon light. On his desk across the hall, visible through the open door, the seismic isolator-bearing model sat where it always sat. A chrome and rubber assembly, the size of a coffee mug. Monica didn't glance at it. Grant did. His eyes moved across the chrome housing and the layered rubber plates inside it, then back to the conference room. He said nothing. Ostrowski had laid the documents out before they arrived. Licensing agreement on the left. Patent abstracts in the center. Royalty history on the right. 47 active licensees listed alphabetically. Avery Construction on page 1. The Highway 97 contract references 3 patents, Ostrowski began. The direct licensing agreement I've prepared covers all 3 under standard terms. Royalty rate is 2% of the seismic retrofit component, consistent with the 46 other active licensees. Grant opened his portfolio and pulled out a pen. He wanted this signed and filed before the bid deadline. Monica reached across the table and picked up the patent abstract. She scanned it the way she scanned restaurant menus, looking for the number at the bottom, not the details above it. Then her hand stopped moving. Ostrowski told me the silence lasted 4 seconds. He counted. Monica set the document down, picked it up again. Read the inventor line a second time. This is wrong, she said. Ostrowski folded his hands on the table. Which part? The name. Her voice had changed. Flat, where it had been bright. This says Alden Krevalin. That's correct. Mr. Krevalin is the sole inventor on all 3 patents and the licensor for every agreement on this table. Grant looked up from his portfolio. His pen hovered over the signature line. He stared at Ostrowski, then at Monica, then back at the documents. Your ex-husband, Grant said. Not a question. Monica didn't answer. Her green eyes moved across the royalty statements. Page after page. Quarterly payments from firms across 12 states. The annual total at the bottom of the summary sheet, $214,000. And there, on the first page of the alphabetical licensee list, a line item that had appeared every quarter for 11 years. Avery Construction, LLC Grant saw it at the same time. His jaw set, he closed his portfolio and placed both hands on the table. We've been paying him, Grant said, my firm, for 11 years. Through a standard sublicensing chain, Ostrowski said. Most licensees don't know the individual patent holder. They pay the licensing entity. The entity pays the inventor. Monica's chin dropped. Her eyes filled, the wounded innocence deployed on cue. I don't understand why nobody told me, she said. Ostrowski's voice didn't shift. The licensing agreements are public record, Mrs. Avery. The patent filings are public record. They've been searchable since 2001. The room went still. Monica's hands lay flat on the oak table. No adjusting jewelry. No touching anyone's arm. No cashmere wrap smoothed across her shoulders. No champagne glass raised like a weapon. For the first time in Ostrowski's account, her hands weren't moving. He pushed the licensing agreement across the table toward Grant. Standard terms, fair rates. No punitive clauses, no markup. The same deal offered to every other licensee, the same deal that had been available to Avery Construction for 11 years. The terms are straightforward, Ostrowski said. 2% of the seismic component, quarterly reporting, standard indemnification. Mr. Krevalin asked me to ensure the process was professional and efficient. Grant picked up his pen. He read the agreement. 2 pages, front and back. Then he signed. 2 signatures, one on each page. The pen pressed hard enough to leave impressions in the oak beneath the paper. He capped it, placed it in his breast pocket, and stood. Monica didn't move. She sat at the conference table with the royalty statement spread before her, her decade of champagne speeches and dinner party verdicts pinned to the oak under 47 licensing agreements, and the name she'd spent 10 years turning into a joke. Grant waited by the door. She didn't look at him. Ostrowski told me he walked them to the foyer. Grant shook his hand again. Shorter grip this time. Monica passed without a word. No adjustment of the cashmere wrap. No hand through Grant's arm. Her heels silent on the hardwood. I finished my coffee on the porch. The Deschutes ran north. The antenna tower caught the last red light on its upper guy wires. I hadn't needed to be in the room. The document said everything I never would. Tyler's truck pulled into the gravel drive on a Saturday afternoon, the week after Sophie spread 40 pages of patent filings across their kitchen table. I heard it from the workshop, the crunch of tires, the engine cutting, a door closing. Then nothing for a long time. I set down my pencil and walked to the workshop doorway. He stood in the yard between the cabin and the river, hands in his jacket pockets, looking at the antenna tower. The same tower his mother called junk in front of 60 people 3 weeks ago. He studied it the way he studied bridge supports at work, taking measurements with his eyes. "Hey," I said. He turned. His face was different. Not the careful neutrality I'd watched him build over 10 years of family dinners. Something had come apart behind it. "Can I see the workshop?" he asked. In 10 years of visits, he'd never asked to come inside. I stepped aside. Tyler walked in and stopped 2 feet past the threshold. The smell of cedar shavings and machine oil. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. His eyes went to the wall. 3 patent certificates in a row. Gold seals. His gaze moved left to right, reading each one. Then to the drafting table. The engineering reference books on the shelf above. The filing cabinet in the corner. He crossed the room and put his hand on the cabinet. 3rd drawer. He looked at me. "Go ahead," I said. He pulled the drawer open. The manila folder was thick. He lifted it out and set it on the drafting table, opened the cover, and started reading. 47 licensing agreements. Quarterly royalty statements sorted by year. His index finger stopped on the first page of the alphabetical list. Avery Construction, LLC, he read out loud. Every quarter. 11 years. He turned the page. More statements. More quarters. More checks written by Grant's firm to a licensing entity that routed every dollar to me. His finger traced the column of numbers down one page, then the next, then the next. Tyler closed the folder and placed both hands flat on the drafting table. The same gesture I'd seen him make at the engagement party. The same gesture he'd made in his kitchen, reading Sophie's printouts. A man bracing against something. Why? His voice cracked on the single syllable. 10 years. She stood up at every dinner, every holiday, every family gathering, and said, "You were nothing, and you just let her." Yes? Why? Louder now. His palm hit the table. I leaned against the filing cabinet. The metal was warm from the afternoon sun through the window. "If I told you the truth, you'd have had to choose," I said. "Your mother or your father? Her version or mine? That's not a load a kid should carry. I'm not a kid anymore. Doesn't change the math." Tyler's shoulders dropped. His head went down. A sound came out of him. Not loud. The kind of sound a man makes when he stops holding something. Then another. His hands stayed flat on the table, holding him up, while the weight he'd been carrying since that first graduation ceremony hit the floor of a workshop he'd never entered. I put my hand on his shoulder, held it there, said nothing more. Outside, The Deschutes ran loud enough to hear through the open door. The fluorescent lights hummed above the drafting table. Cedar shavings from my morning work still curled on the floor near the pencil sharpener. We stood like that until the light through the west window went from yellow to amber. The river outside. The drafting table under his palms. The folder of royalty statements open between us. 10 years of documentation neither of us had wanted to read together. Peggy called that evening after Tyler left. I was on the porch. She'd heard from Tyler, who'd called Sophie, who'd called her. "I told you so," she said. Her voice shook. "You did. Every time. Every dinner. Every holiday." A long breath. "He knows now. He knows." She was quiet for a moment. Was it worth it? The silence? I looked at the antenna tower, the upper guy wires catching the last red light, the way they did every evening. Patient, long view. He came on his own. Nobody made him choose. Yeah. It was worth it. The rest happened without me. Sophie's research moved through the family the way information does. Not announced, passed. Tyler mentioned it to a college friend who'd been at the engagement party. That friend mentioned it to another. Peggy told her bridge group. The correction traveled the same channels Monica had used to build the story in the first place. I heard the details secondhand, weeks later. One of the women from the engagement party called Peggy to apologize. Said she'd felt wrong about the toast, but didn't know why until now. Another guest, someone I'd never met, looked up the patent filings on the USPTO database after hearing about them at a dinner party. Found all 3. Printed them out the way Sophie had. Monica called friends from her Lake Oswego living room. Her 11th call that week. I was only trying to help, she told them. The wounded defense that had silenced Peggy in 2022. But this time, they'd seen the patent filings. The licensing records, the numbers. Numbers don't change when someone cries. Grant secured the Highway 97 contract. The signed license cleared his bid. $40 million of bridge work. But something between him and Monica had shifted at that conference table in Portland, and it didn't shift back. The 11 redecorations, the cashmere wraps, the gold at her wrists, all built on a story that collapsed the moment she read my name on a piece of paper. I didn't follow it, didn't need to. Tyler came back the next Saturday with Sophie. They sat in the workshop while I explained the isolator-bearing designs. Tyler pointed at the bearing cross-section on the drafting table. How does the horizontal displacement stay within tolerance during a sustained event? He asked. Good question. The kind I'd waited 27 years to hear from him. That was enough. If you're still with me, hit like and tell me, how would you rate my revenge from 1 to 10, and why? 6 months after the engagement party, Tyler's truck pulled into the gravel drive every Saturday morning. Same crunch of tires, same engine cutting, but no long silence in the yard anymore. He came straight to the workshop. We sat side by side at the drafting table. Engineering drawings spread between us. I showed him how to read load paths through a pier cross-section, how the stress distribution told you where a bridge would fail before it knew itself. He asked good questions, the kind that made me reach for a fresh sheet of paper to sketch the answer. What happens to the load path when the pier cracks below the bearing seat? I'd draw it out. He'd study the sketch, then ask the next one. Sophie came most weekends, too. She'd sit on the porch with coffee and a book while Tyler and I worked. Sometimes she'd lean against the workshop doorframe, listen for a minute, then go back to her book without a word. One night in late November, atmospheric conditions lined up. I'd been trying to reach a station in Hokkaido for 6 months. Every attempt faded before the signal locked. But that night, the F2 layer cooperated for the first time. The ICOM's display glowed green in the dark room. Outside, the antenna tower stood against the last light on the ridgeline. I keyed the mic and called CQ on 20 meters, and the operator in Hokkaido came back clean. No static, no fade. 14 seconds of clear signal. "Good evening," he said. "Good evening," I said. That was the whole conversation. I told Tyler about it the next morning on the porch. Coffee cups on the railing. The Deschutes running north below us. Cascade peaks carrying last week's snow against a sky the color of slate. 14 seconds, he said. That's it. That's everything. He laughed. A real one. No jaw lock, no redirect. I looked at the river. Same current it had carried for 10,000 years. I checked the Seiko on my wrist. Same watch I'd worn for 30 years. Tyler asked me once why the isolator bearings used rubber instead of steel. Same reason, I told him. The ones that survive are designed to move, to absorb what hits them and send the energy somewhere it can't do damage. I never needed Monica to see my worth. I just needed my son to. The river ran north. The antenna tower held.